Okay, I said I was going to do this recording a little while ago, just with PallyPower and setup. Um, Firstly, I'm using the 1.1Q version, which was the previous version before there was any errors during the buffing phase when they updated it about 12 times in 2 days. So if there's any massive changes between the two, I'll update the other one as well and run with the new version and check the settings on that as well. But um, first thing to look at is in the rate, or actually all your settings are shown as here. They're not detrimental to how you run your PallyPower, it's just more of how it looks. Your buttons is mainly related to these things on the side here, so your seal button or Righteous Fury, and then whatever seal you want to run. Auto buff is what you want to have so that you can left click, right click. But yeah, not really important. The raid button is where you want to have things set for, especially when you're blessing salvation. If a player is marked as the main tank and you're blessing salvation, you want to override that buff or notify them that they have that buff for them to remove it themselves. So it doesn't always happen, so it's best to rebuff or overbuff the salvation with something else to override it. So that's where that option is here. So if you've ticked auto buff main tank, override warriors that have blessing of salvation, I currently have it set to blessing of sacrifice. If I was in the prot tree, I would have blessing of sanctuary, because you can 5-minute buff stack with the greater blessing of sanctuary, so that you'll have the two buffs. But right now I use blessing of sacrifice because I don't have sanct. It also only lasts 30 seconds, so it doesn't sit on their buff table for too long and hit the buff cap. So 30 second. You can do the same thing for main assistant. Again, warriors. The second one down here is druids, paladins. Obviously, if druid or paladin's tanking, same thing. You can change it to whatever it is. Now, if you've got all the buffs covered in PallyPower, or every single class has every single buff whatever they needed, sacrifice is good to have because it doesn't override anyone else's 15-minute buff. Well, it won't override it anyway, so it won't pop off the salvation. So sacrifice is a good one just to remove the debuff. Back into PallyPower itself. On the left here you can see who has improved what blessings. Currently I only have 5 from 5 in might and nothing else is improved. Currently right now I'm just grouped with my warrior. I have them set as main tank. My main tank frame doesn't actually show up unless I'm in a group of more of 5 people or more. That's just a voodoo setting that I've had. That's how I display my main tanks and everything else, but that's another day. I can show you guys how I use voodoo. Right now we have the warrior and myself as a tank. Give myself wisdom. Up here above the icons under the class we'll have the class names or the player names. Currently nothing is set here, but in these options I can scroll and change a 5-minute buff. So if myself is here and 4 other paladins, and then I have a prop pally as well, I can scroll their name and just change their buff to be whatever that you want to buff them with. So if you've only got 4 pallies and you want to give that paladin sanct, you scroll until you come across that. You can bless all other paladins with wisdom and a 5-minute buff here. Right click for a 5-minute buff. With the auto assignment of tanks, if they're already assigned a role as a tank and you go to give them a buff, it will automatically change to that blessing of sacrifice. So I can left click buff all warriors with salvation, and then right click instantly to remove uh, Faker's Blessing of Salvation. So names will pop out, all other warriors here will populate with Salvation. Whoever doesn't have Salvation, actually I'm going to tick this off because it's probably better to show it here. All other classes, all other players will be green, and anyone that needs to be buffed with a 5-minute buff will be in blue. So it's a visual reminder that everyone else has what they need, and you can right click, cast the 5-minute buff. 15-minute buff left click, I currently have Wisdom. It's telling me I'm missing something that I've assigned up here. I can right click that, add the 5-minute buff. So super important up here for main tanks, especially if they are and you're assigned to do Salvation. Make sure that in the options settings under the raid tab, override warriors with Blessing of Salvation with whatever buff is going to knock that Blessing of Salvation off. So mine is currently Sacrifice. Yeah, like I said before, if you want to change these manually, you can scroll manually. So if you have druids, one feral druid, cat DPS, and you're buffing everyone with wisdom and you want to give that feral druid might, you can just scroll and give them might. I'm going to check out the newer version of PallyPower, but this is currently the old version. It hasn't changed too much on the visual setup and the display setup. It was just more of the inner workings and extra options that didn't allow you to buff if someone was below 5 minutes. So if your top warrior had 6 minutes left of a buff, but the 3 others below them had died in the last fight, it wouldn't allow you to buff that class again, which was a pain in the ass. You had to 5-minute buff every single person, which is why I rolled back to 1.1 before they did the change. The only other one I wanted to mention as well for potential prop pallies is the King Spam macro. In PallyPower, you're actually assigned a button, so you can actually make this a button. Click PallyPower C7 left button. That would be whatever class is the 7th order down. So PallyPower C1 generally be warriors, and then rogues, etc. Priests. As you go down, this button here, or this spam macro, is for the King's spam threat. So you can repetitively mash that. It will just it will continue to greater Blessing of King spam the class in this slot. So you can change this. So if we've got 10 warriors, I'll change that to 1 and save that. If you've only got 4 warriors and 10 rogues, we'll change that to 2 and then save C2 and save that. So C1, C2, C3, C4, C5, C6, etc. as you go down. Another one I have here is just a weak aura that displays how many casts, how much threat, and how much threat per second I'm using for that. That's basically it for what I want to run with PallyPower. If you have any questions on any of the settings, or if something's not quite working for you, just let me know and I'll try and update and see what's going wrong.